thank you again so much for joining us. And I'd like to turn first to Bill Brown from the Surveillance Camera Players, who also has a presentation for you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Checking this mic. I gather you can hear me. Right in front of you. Perfect. I have a video loaded, and if there's time, we'll show it.
Should I set it up right now?
Yes?
Can you assume that that's going to
I will, so when I cue it, we'll get it. Yes, my name is Bill Brown. You might also know me as Bill Not Bored. Not Bored is a situationist fanzine I founded in 1983. It is still active. The Situationists were a revolutionary organization in Europe and the United States many years ago. I'm kind of a ringer on this panel in that I've never been an innocent victim of surveillance. I've never been a victim of mistaken ID or false identification, swept up innocently a sweep. If I've been surveilled, it's because I've been goddamn guilty. I've been a political activist for a very long time. I come from a political family. And in fact, I focused on surveillance since 1996. And I have been heavily and constantly surveilled for almost 20 years, which is a nice claim to make. And unfortunately, I know that for a fact. In 1998, I made a Freedom of Information request with the FBI. And they said, yes, we have a file on you. It is electronic surveillance, which meant that my phone was tapped, and you can't see it because we're using it. I kept web stats for my website, notbored.org, every day between May 2000 and April 2004. So this was 10 years ago, and what I found was alarming, that between 40 and 50 times a day, the following sorts of people were visiting the website, or entities. All four branches of the United States military, Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, the federal government in the form of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the NSA, and the then alleged President of the United States, George Bush, who visited, or his staff visited my website several times. The website was also visited very often by the militaries and governments of a great many foreign countries. I also know that I lead a surveilled life from news reports. It was reported by Freedom of Information Act that was in public places. I have seen agents face to face. They do one of two things I found. They either say, I'm the agent. You know, you can ask from the stage, are there any agents of the federal government? And if their intent is actually to chill free speech, they'll just pipe right up and say, yes, I'm the agent assigned to watch this meeting. And if they are not intending to chill free speech, they do a very little bit of performance themselves. If you're set about in a circle, they'll be right at the edge of the circle, neither inside the circle, neither outside, neither listening or not paying attention. It's really quite a performance in its own right. Surveillance Camera Players, or SCP, was founded in 1996 as a performance troupe. There were about a half dozen people involved, and all through the group's history, there were a half dozen people all through it, although the people would change. Everything that the Surveillance Camera Players did was as the result of something the Situationists called detournement. A fancy word which means that you steal something and you use it against what it was designed to do. So our version of detournement was there'd be a police camera or a private camera on a street corner. It's designed to either intimidate you, make you act in conformity with law and order, and we'd stand right in front of the camera, stealing its thunder by holding up a sign to it that says, we know you're watching, mind your own business. At first, we took famous avant-garde authors, just kind of for shits and giggles, Alfred Jarret, Edgar Allan Poe, Samuel Beckett, George Orwell, and did silent versions of their plays. and stuck them on placards in front of the surveillance camera. Between 1999 and 2001, the surveillance camera players grew immensely. We began writing our own plays. We started making maps of publicly installed cameras in Manhattan. There are about 15 of those maps of 12 different neighborhoods. I began offering weekly free walking tours based on those maps, which led to a tremendous amount of publicity and coverage in the mainstream press. And we also produced some position papers, and it's very interesting to me now, almost 15 years later, to revisit the position papers and see how they stand up now, and I wanted to just share 4 quick ones with you. In my mind, or the mind of the surveillance camera players, surveillance is not an issue of individual rights. That's a trap. It's an issue that's a social issue. Not, are you allowed to have free speech? Are you allowed to have free speech? It's an issue of what kind of society is being created under our nose. Surveillance, I believe, has not conquered this country. It can be stopped and reversed anytime. And the reason I say that is that's true for capitalism too. Capitalism somehow survives from crisis to crisis, and it always seems one step away from completely breaking down. We only believe that it's seamless, and never breaks down, because they've got really good PR agents, and so do the surveillance. Surveillance was actually abandoned here in New York City in the early 70s. It can happen again. As a result of these things, I, as an artist, have the luxury of being an extremist. I am opposed to any surveillance device in public, period. I don't want to have the government regulate those cameras. I don't want to have rights that allow me to be surveilled here and not there in public. To my mind, they can all come down. Finally, and this is, I find that many artists are involved with surveillance, but they always make themselves into a detective. So that if they're interested in surveillance, they become a detective and follow people around. Or they hire somebody to follow them around. I really dislike that very much. My feeling is if you're going to identify yourself, don't identify yourself with the cops. You are more likely to be a fleeing criminal than a police officer, even a smart detective like Mulder or the ones you see on TV. It's a very important lesson, I think, about who your deepest identification is with. In October of 2000, we gave our first performance against face recognition software at Visionix in Jersey City. The performance was a disaster. Nobody was there. Nobody knew what face recognition was, and we were ignored. On September 7th, 2001, we were a little more successful. We organized an International Day Against Video Surveillance. In 22 cities, in 8 countries, there were people standing in front of surveillance cameras, publicly surveillance cameras going like this. Yeah, it was pretty incredible, I thought. 4 days later, September 11th happened, and obviously there was an attempt to make all protest movements, all anti-globalization movements, all the protests that were simmering between 1999 and 2001 go away. In 2003, we began paying attention to cell phones because the industry was saying itself that video cameras are not going to be the future, that cell phones are, and indeed that has turned out to be the case. If we hear about surveillance these days, it's a little less about video cameras and these surveillance devices that we carry in our pockets called cell phones. In 2006, our 10th anniversary, we published a book called We Know You Are Watching, which summarized everything we had done in 10 years. There was a 10th anniversary performance. We summarized our successes and failures in 10 years, and then I took a well-needed break. For the last 4 years, I've been making maps on and off. Those maps are going to be published, or have been published, in France by the editions Aquavit. All of them in alphabetical order. It's dated September 11, 2014. And I've written a various series of articles. So if there is time, I'd like to show 2 or 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes of the best video that the surveillance camera players did. Perfect.
Well,
Just hit it.
you're gonna move.
What I'm showing you was recorded November of 1998. It is the troupe performing George Orwell's 1984 in the subway station of 7th Avenue and 14th Street in Manhattan. The whole thing goes for about 9.5 minutes, but I'll be showing you the important part, which is when the cops come. Oh, it's good. I have an idea. Come on.
Give you a sound.
I hope this will be satisfactory. You'll get the idea. The fun starts when a voice says, "Look at my monitor and tell me what you see," which is the token booth clerk talking to two people from the NYPD. The NYPD's first lines will be Act 4, at least that's what he sees on the monitor, and then the dialogue about free speech begins.